Some mornings, life greets you with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that lingers after disappointment, rejection, or loss. You stare at your phone. No messages. Deadlines loom. Energy feels distant. And you start to wonder, not just how to fix it, but who you're becoming in the process. Setbacks don't need to scream to be powerful. Sometimes, it's the quiet unraveling that stings the most. You did things right. You tried. You gave effort. You made plans. And still, something broke. The job slipped away. The relationship faded. The results didn't come. And now, you're standing at a crossroads without a map. But what if this wasn't a detour? What if this was the path? Stoic philosophy doesn't promise comfort. It never did. What it offers instead is transformation. It trains you, not to avoid the storm, but to walk straight through it. It teaches you to anchor yourself when everything around you shifts. Because setbacks, to the Stoic, are not interruptions to life. They are life's invitation to evolve. In the next 10 chapters, we're going to explore how to face pain with presence. Not numb it. Not run from it. But meet it with clarity, discipline, and meaning. Not with blind optimism, but with a sharp, quiet strength. This is how we begin again, on purpose. Let's start. 1. Face the facts without flinching. Most people spend more energy avoiding the truth than facing it. They distract themselves with work, numb themselves with entertainment, or hide behind rehearsed explanations. But avoidance is not protection, it's paralysis. Pain that is buried doesn't disappear. It festers. Stoicism begins with brutal clarity. Epictetus said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." That's why the first step in recovery from any setback is exposure. Not to the world, but to yourself. What happened? Why it hurt? What role you played in it? No edits. No drama. Just truth. That's where journaling becomes a weapon. Not a place to complain, but a mirror to confront. You write down what happened. You describe how it felt. You ask yourself, what am I pretending not to see? Through the page, pain becomes a path instead of a prison. Philosophers like Socrates and Plato believed that wisdom begins with definition. You must name your experience clearly before you can transform it. Jung later echoed this, stating that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So you start with the facts, not the excuses. You stop running. You sit with it. You say, this is where I am. And only then, only when you stand without flinching, can you begin to move forward with purpose. 2. Stop letting failure define you. Failure has a way of whispering lies in moments of vulnerability. It doesn't just say, you failed. It says, you are a failure. And if you're not careful, that voice becomes familiar, so familiar it starts to shape your identity. But a single event, no matter how painful, cannot tell the whole story of who you are. The Stoics knew this deeply. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that the mind is what interprets, not what simply reacts. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When we allow failure to become a fixed label, we hand over that power. Aristotle wrote that we become what we repeatedly do. That includes how we think about ourselves. If you keep rehearsing the story that you're not good enough, not ready, not worthy, you begin to sculpt a character that aligns with that narrative, even when it isn't true. Socrates pushed his students to question every assumption, especially the ones they held about themselves. And this is where Stoicism shines. It invites you to reclaim authorship of your self-perception. To say, that moment did not define me, it refined me. So what if you change the question from, why did I fail, to, who am I becoming because of this? What if you stopped asking what went wrong, and instead asked what can now go right, because you've seen the truth of yourself and survived it. Failure isn't your reflection. It's your redirection. Let it teach you, but never let it name you. 3. Reconnect with your why. There's a moment after every major setback where everything feels foggy. Motivation fades. Direction blurs. You go through the motions, but the meaning feels drained. And without meaning, discipline becomes punishment, not progress. That's why you don't just need action, you need anchored purpose. Marcus Aurelius often returned to the idea of living according to one's nature. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being." Work, to the Stoic, wasn't just labor. It was the practice of fulfilling one's deeper role. And when you forget that role, everything else collapses. Carl Jung once said that people don't suffer from a lack of answers. They suffer from a lack of meaning. That's why pain hits so hard when you're disconnected from your reason for beginning in the first place. If your why was never deeply rooted, the storm pulls it out like a weak tree in shallow soil. But reconnecting doesn't mean waiting for a moment of divine clarity. It means returning to the source. Ask yourself, what mattered to me before things got hard? What did I love before I felt the weight of disappointment? What would still be worth pursuing, even if no one ever applauded? Plato taught that the soul is drawn toward what is most real. So look for what still feels true when everything else feels temporary. Not what excites you, but what endures in you. Even in silence. Even in pain. Because when your why becomes clear, your how becomes unstoppable. 4. Change the way you speak about it. Words are not just sounds, they are frameworks. They shape how you interpret events, how you carry yourself through suffering, and how you position your identity after adversity. Language doesn't just describe your world. It builds it. When you describe your setback as ruin, failure, or punishment, you reinforce a powerless position. But when you choose words like lesson, training, or even initiation, your nervous system responds differently. Your body stops bracing for defeat and begins preparing for growth. Aristotle believed that language and logic were the instruments of thought. He taught that the precision of your words reflects the precision of your thinking. That's why Stoics like Epictetus warned about careless speech, not because it's rude, but because it can be self-destructive. Negative self-talk is more than habit. It becomes a ritual of self-erosion. You begin to speak with certainty about your own limits. You say things like, I always mess things up, this always happens to me, or, I'm just not that kind of person. These phrases don't describe your past. They lock your future into a false prediction. But you can reclaim the script. You can speak in a way that honors your struggle without glorifying your wounds. You can say, I went through something difficult, and I'm learning what it's teaching me. You can describe yourself as someone in process, not someone permanently damaged. Socrates believed that self-knowledge comes through dialogue. Begin that dialogue with yourself. Speak clearly. Speak truthfully. And above all, speak with the expectation that your words are leading you somewhere better, not just describing where you've been. 5. Win small, win daily. After a setback, the temptation is to search for one massive breakthrough, a single act that fixes everything. But life rarely works that way. What actually restores strength isn't grand gestures. It's rhythm. It's repetition. It's small victories that slowly rebuild your sense of trust in yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to not expect Plato's Republic. In other words, don't wait for perfection. Don't get paralyzed by the fantasy of how things should look. Start where you are. Take the next step, even if it feels beneath the scale of your pain. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But the how must be grounded in movement. Clarity doesn't strike from the sky. It emerges from motion. You don't wait for belief to act, you act your way back into belief. Small, repeatable actions done with integrity. That's the Stoic path. You don't wait to feel motivated. You don't wait for the past to feel fair. You choose one thing today that sharpens your spirit. A walk. A page in a book. A task completed. A decision made. And then you do it again tomorrow. And again the next day. Until momentum returns. Aristotle wrote that excellence is not an act, but a habit. What you do daily becomes who you are eventually. So you focus not on the distance left to travel, but on the single step in front of you. And you make that step count. Because winning doesn't begin with triumph. It begins with showing up, consistently, quietly, and without applause. 6. Guard your energy like a fortress. Not all pain comes from what happens. Much of it comes from who we allow in when we're vulnerable. After a setback, your emotional defenses are low. Which means what you consume, conversations, social media, poorly filtered advice, can either amplify the wound or begin to heal the mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But often, those thoughts aren't fully yours. They're shaped by the voices around you. Friends who dramatize. News that inflames. People who project their own fears onto you as if they were facts. Carl Jung warned that the collective unconscious affects us more than we realize. In moments of personal collapse, you must become a guardian of your own psyche. That's not selfishness. That's strategy. The energy you need to rebuild cannot be squandered on arguments, distractions, or comparisons. Plato described the just man as one who maintains internal order before trying to fix the external world. That takes selective silence. It requires intentional pauses. It demands that you say no to draining conversations, agitating content, and routines that strip you of clarity. Your energy is not infinite. And when you're hurt, every drop matters. So treat your time, attention, and inner peace like fortresses. Let in only what strengthens. Close the gates to anything that feeds the chaos. Because rebuilding requires focus. And focus is born from protection. 7. Discipline over drama. When the world doesn't respond the way you hoped, it's easy to become theatrical. You replay conversations. You imagine different outcomes. You let emotion dictate your pace. But Stoicism doesn't thrive in reaction, it thrives in repetition. And the most powerful repetition of all is disciplined action, especially when no one sees it. Epictetus taught that it's not the event that disturbs us, but our judgment about the event. Emotions aren't enemies, but they're not leaders either. They rise and fall like waves. Discipline is the anchor beneath them. The quiet, repeated decision to show up, even when inspiration disappears. Carl Jung pointed out that modern people are often possessed by moods they don't recognize. The Stoic path is different. You don't obey every mood. You watch it, name it, and choose your action anyway. You trade impulsive expression for consistent excellence. Socrates modeled this principle. He didn't just talk about philosophy, he embodied it, even when facing death. His composure wasn't passivity. It was strength grounded in reason. And that same kind of composure is possible in daily life, choosing the disciplined path, even when the emotional one begs for attention. Discipline isn't cold. It's clarifying. It removes the drama from healing. It says, regardless of how I feel today, I will move in the direction of the person I am becoming. And in doing so, you prove something essential to yourself, not that you're immune to emotion, but that you're not ruled by it. That is freedom. And it's earned through discipline. 8. Don't carry it, the pain. There's a difference between feeling pain and carrying it. Feeling pain is human. Carrying it long after it's taught its lesson, that's optional. Yet many people do exactly that. They wear their past as armor, as identity, as proof of survival. But what begins as protection eventually becomes a prison. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's not to minimize your experience, it's to highlight how often we rehearse our suffering long after the moment has passed. We replay the betrayal. We relive the loss. We retell the story until it becomes a scar we refuse to let fade. But pain, like all teachers, has a time to speak, and a time to leave. If you silence it too soon, you miss the wisdom. But if you hold on to it too long, you miss the growth. Carl Jung believed that pain exposes the parts of ourselves that have yet to mature. It reveals where the inner structure still needs strength. Plato viewed education as the drawing out of what is already within. Pain is one such instructor. It doesn't bring something foreign, it exposes what was buried. Boundaries. Blind spots. Unspoken fears. When acknowledged, these truths make you stronger. But only if you let the pain go after it has delivered its message. The Stoic does not glorify pain. He listens to it. Learns from it. And then, he lets it go. Because he knows, what you carry becomes what you are shaped by. So ask yourself, what part of the pain still serves you? And what part are you carrying simply because you forgot you could set it down? 9. Choose who you're becoming. After a fall, the instinct is often to return, to get back to who you were before the failure, before the pain, before the world shifted. But what if that version of you is no longer the destination? What if the setback wasn't meant to break you, but to refine the blueprint of who you're meant to become? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." He didn't mean that obstacles disappear. He meant that they reveal. They strip away illusion. They force you to meet yourself honestly, without the mask of momentum or success. And in that raw place, you are given a rare opportunity to choose your evolution. Aristotle taught that character is formed by habit, by conscious repetition of action aligned with virtue. That means each response to adversity is a sculptor's stroke on the statue of your future self. Are you carving out resentment, or resilience? Avoidance, or courage? Bitterness, or clarity? Plato believed the soul longs for truth. And adversity is one of the few things that interrupts the noise long enough for truth to be heard. It's in the stillness after failure that you can finally ask, what do I stand for now? Not what others expect. Not who you used to be. But who you are becoming through conscious decision. This chapter isn't about getting back. It's about going forward. With intention. With sovereignty. With a standard not inherited from others, but born from the fire you've walked through. Because identity isn't a recovery. It's a creation. And the pen is in your hands. 10. Finish the story your way. Setbacks often feel like endings. A job lost. A dream delayed. A relationship fractured. But Stoicism teaches that no single event has the authority to close your narrative, unless you allow it. The power to finish the story belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius, facing war, illness, and betrayal, still wrote daily reminders to himself that meaning was self-authored. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. That wasn't morbidity. It was urgency. A call to live actively, not passively. To write consciously, not in reaction to others, but in alignment with inner truth. Carl Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, only happens when a person integrates all experiences, not just the joyful ones. Your suffering is part of the material. So is your healing. So is your response. None of it needs to be erased. But all of it can be shaped. Aristotle spoke of telos, a purpose, a final cause, a direction that defines action. Setbacks feel aimless only when you forget that the future is unwritten. The ink is still wet. The sentence isn't finished. And you are still the one holding the pen. So define the end of this chapter with awareness. Maybe slower, maybe quieter, but not weaker. You don't need to erase what happened. You just need to decide what it will mean in the context of your larger story. You can't control how the storm began. But you can decide how the next page turns. With stillness. With strength. With authorship. Conclusion. The fall is not what defines you. The rebuild is. Life won't reward you for staying down, nor will it wait for you to feel ready. But it will respond, quietly, consistently, to the way you rise. Not with noise. Not with a show. But with intention. With daily presence. With a standard you uphold when no one is watching. Stoicism doesn't offer a dramatic comeback. It offers a deliberate one. It teaches you that strength is not found in pretending to be untouched by life, but in being touched deeply, and choosing to respond with clarity instead of chaos. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about mastering your response so deeply that emotions serve, not sabotage, your purpose. You've walked through fire. Now choose what that fire forges. Reclaim authorship. Redefine what this moment means. Finish the sentence your way. Not with bitterness, but with direction. Not with denial, but with courage. And not with the illusion of perfection, but with the grounded wisdom of someone who stood in their pain and didn't flinch. Let this be the start of your next chapter, not because the world said you were ready, but because you chose to act like it. If this spoke to something in you, keep going. Keep studying. Keep rising, quietly, consistently, deliberately. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning to mean something deeper.